Hello, and welcome to Mary's Eclectic Interests. I'm your host, Sue Ellen Zagrabelny, and our guest today is Gary Legwold, author of Final Rounds on Love, Loss, Life, and Lefse. Thank you for returning to CCX Create to tell us about your new novel. What can you tell us about the inspiration to write a children's book?
Well, first, thank you. It's good to see you again. It's good to be back. I didn't start out, I just wanted to write a novel. I think the novel is the highest form of writing for an author. And so I started off just coming up with this short little thing that I was going to spin into something, and it just took off wonderfully. And it ended up as a book for kids 12 basically and up. So it's a book that it's on a tough topic. My papa passed away today. I don't know what to do is how it begins. And it's a hard subject for kids 12 years old, any people, any kid who loses a grandfather. It's the first experience with death. But how Amaya, the main character, goes at this grief in a creative way is what drew me along throughout the book.
Okay, can you explain the significance of the title, please?
Well, Final Rounds, they share, Papa is the Lefse maker. Lefse is a Norwegian flatbread in this small town. And Amaya learned from him. And so when he passed away, she remembers this night when they made 630 rounds of Lefse. It's a big snowstorm, 28 inches of snow, and all they had to do is make Lefse. So how she handles her grief is remembering this wonderful night full of lots of stories, lots of humor. And so her final memory is of final rounds, these rounds of Lefse that they finally made together. So final rounds, it's got a double meaning. Rounds, a round of Lefse is round. And at least that's what we tried to do when we rolled them, get them round. And so he would always tell her how to make them round. And they practiced again and again. And then the final part is, it's the last time, and it has special significance.
To what audience do you see this book appealing? You mentioned 12 and over. Would it be appropriate for parents to read to younger children who had experienced loss?
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of rhyming at the beginning, but grief is universal, and I think a lot of my readers are parents who bought the book for their child. And then they started reading it and said, gee, this is a great book about grief. It's a great book about loss and love and life. And it's not, grief is about let me think of this quote. Khalil Gibran said, grieving is like weeping for that which has been your delight. So that contrast between weeping and delight. And most of the book is delight, these delightful memories. But then at the end and at the beginning, there's a lot of weeping involved because it's a loss, a heavy loss. Mm-hmm. So it's a book about grief and especially aimed at kids. There's not much written for kids. 12 years old, about grief. And so I wanted to write a book about grief and loss and the meaning of death and life and what happens when our loved ones pass away, what happens to traditions that they start, the old ones start, and then they go. What happens to those traditions?
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Do you have an example?
Well, Lefse making is a great old Norwegian tradition that every Lefse maker I know always worries that this thing is going to die out when they die. Will the young ones pick it up? Well, it's our responsibility as the old Lefse makers to teach and to engage. And but there comes a time when we go. And will my granddaughter pick it up? And how will she do it? And will she honor the traditions? Will she add to the tradition her own little style? This is something that's universally concerned for all people who are our age, and they have traditions in the family. And will the young ones pick it up? So.
Yeah. At my church in Illinois, when I lived in Illinois, some of the older members taught. They did a night of making lefse and teaching people, and so there were young parents with their children, and so they got exposed to it. And some of them were not Norwegian, so it was kind of a foreign concept to them. But they really enjoyed it, and it passed the tradition along.
Right. I mean, when I bring out my Lefse grill and all my stuff, the kids come off the couch. They put down their phones. This is something that's fun to do. I mean, ricing potatoes, especially. That stuff squirts out of that basket, and they say, wow, this is really cool. And then they always want to roll Lefse, and they always want to eat Lefse, and it's a great ambassador. Lefse is a great ambassador, especially to the young people who may not know what Lefse is and don't get the significance of it. Well, they get the significance of it through the taste, and then they see their aunt or their uncle or their papa. They see them rolling and enjoying it, and they want to be part of that. So it's a wonderful way to. It's an entree into other traditions. I mean, people say, well, where did Lefse begin? And so you start telling them, and it's telling them about other traditions in your family and the importance of tradition.
Yes.
And then when somebody dies, what do we hold on to? Well, we have our memories, but we also have the traditions that they taught us.
Yes.
Those are especially cherished.
Yes. Just a question. Butter and sugar, butter and cinnamon and sugar, and tell the audience the significance of that.
Well, the traditional way is butter and sugar, but I like butter, cinnamon, and sugar. Other people like brown sugar. Other people make Lefse wraps that put cheeses and meats and sauces and all sorts of good things. Lefse is a great wrap. It is very tasty, very toasty. You got that potatoy taste. So it's a wonderful food. Plain. I mean, my Lefse, I'll say humbly with Norwegian humility, is good enough that I can eat it plain because it's that tasty. But you add butter, it gets better. Butter, a little sugar, it gets better and better. So.
Yes, I'm a butter and sugar person.
Okay.
Myself. Talk about the character development in Final Rounds. There are some really interesting people that you've placed in the novel.
Well, it was my granddaughter she's the idea for the main character. And the name Amaya is the same as the name of my granddaughter. I thought about changing the name because, well, I wanted to change it up, but I couldn't come up with a better name. Amaya's got a ring to it that I love, and much of the first third of the book is rhyming. But I also wanted to make this personal. I wanted to look ahead to when I die, frankly, and Papa is a form of me. And so the relationship between Papa and Amaya is me and my granddaughter. But we're different in some ways. I changed things because it's fiction. But I also wanted to, as I said, look ahead to my death and what happens after I go. How will people react? How do I want to go? I mean, what do I want my ceremony, my service, my funeral, my burial to be like. I took a class on basically how to die, how to get your things in order. And this started me thinking, just how do I want to go out? And it was in the back of my mind all the time as I was writing this. Amaya, a main character that comes into the middle of the book is Mrs. Taylor, and she's perhaps she's my favorite character, frankly. Amaya is black, and Mrs. Taylor is black, and they live in this small town, New Sallyard, Minnesota, and it's mostly a white town. But Amaya is struggling with identity, and now she's lost her papa, and so she remembers Mrs. Taylor, who is black and has lived in this town, and has to learn how to be black in this town, to be black and in this all-white town, basically. And she's a teacher, a high school teacher, and she's got very good posture. She's a great teacher. But I had to let her be her. I didn't want to invent anything, and this is where the beauty of fiction comes out. You have this idea, and the character is born, and you let it go. You follow her around. You hear her voice, and not put her voice into your head. You hear it and then write it down. Timothy is another character. He's Amaya's boyfriend, and I had to listen to Amaya on this one. The fictional Amaya. I mean, who would she be attracted to, and why would Timothy be attracted to her? So there are, I think, 5 main characters. Some of these, my daughter's in it, my wife is in it, my son is in it, but they're very small characters that are sort of support, especially at the end during the funeral. So character development is a lot about listening to the higher powers that come through us when we write fiction.
What allows you to speak in a feminine voice? How did you, if I may use the word channel, a 12-year-old and channel a high school English teacher?
Well, the 12-year-old, I just imagine, would my granddaughter say this? And you just get an attitude, basically. I mean, my granddaughter's got an attitude, so I can easily hear that. I hear it every day. I take her to school and we joke back and forth. So that one was easy. Mrs. Taylor was a little more difficult, but I didn't try to put anything on it. I tried to hear it. She's from Mississippi, but I didn't try to put a lot of a Southern accent in there. I tried to put someone who is from Mississippi and is trying to fit in to a northern town. What would she do? Well, she would try to start talking Minnesotan, and yet trying to maintain herself. That was the most difficult. I didn't want to try to create a character that wasn't true. I didn't want to step in it, if you know what I mean, step in something bad that makes her look phony, but I felt like this was the type of person that she was. So I just heard it and I wrote it down and I read it again and again, and I thought, yes, this would be a person who would speak like this in this small town.
It's always a mystery of how I would write in a male voice, and I'm trying to imagine what it's like writing in a female voice. I'm always eager to ask that question of an author because I don't know the answer for me, and I'm always interested to hear what other people say.
Well, I wanted her to say something. Whatever the passage was, I wanted her to say something. And then I would go back through it and I would touch it up that, women do speak a little different at times. Surprisingly, there's a lot of overlap, though. And a lot of the difference comes from just their personality, not their gender. So I stuck with that.
Okay, yes. Talk about developing a sense of place in the novel.
Well, I like that it's in Minnesota. I like that it's a small town in Minnesota along the Mississippi River. New Seljord is a fictional name. I made it up. Seljord is a town in Norway, where my ancestors came from. So I thought I'd just throw that in there. But I liked this contrast of a woman from Mississippi coming to a small town in Minnesota. And I like the fact that it's a white town that is open to different races, but doesn't quite know how to go about it. And it was a wonderful contrast. I mean, Amaya is Black, and she's trying to figure out who she is in this. Her mother's Colombian because Papa, they adopted her mother from Colombia, and Mrs. Taylor is Black, and her family was Black, but there's not much else in the town. Who am I as a Black girl, Amaya? Who am I in this white family, this white town? So it's just a wonderful, fertile ground for self-exploration. And then on top of it, she's trying to find out who she is in light of the loss of her papa.
My next question would be, did you discover the place or did you name the place?
I named it, and then I discovered it in my mind. Papa lives on a farm, and I've driven that country enough to know the topography and the area and the influence of the Mississippi River.
Yes. Without giving too much away of the plot, you've talked a little bit about it. Can you mention the 8 rules of life? Talk about how they developed. I would name them or don't name them. That's your choice.
Well, Pop had always quizzed. He'd always given this kind of phony baloney, not phony baloney, but advice to, kiddingly, he would advise his grandkids on these 8 rules of life. They knew them by heart as they grew up. They are, do not be a Pobbles, do not be a Chobbles, do not pass go, remember Kablooey, know a knot, tend to your Ticonderoga, have a hanky, and turn around when you're done. So they would memorize these things and say them back to Papa whenever he'd challenge them. But they didn't know what they meant. And so during this night of 26 inches, the final rounds night, when they make all this lefse, they have all this time, and Amaya says, Papa, what do these mean? Well, it turns out he does not know what they mean. He just sort of makes it up. But as he makes them up that night, they are full of wisdom on how to live life, how to conduct yourself, how to enjoy yourself, how to believe in yourself.
The believing in yourself is the really important one.
Yeah.
The believing in yourself. Talk about your granddaughter's response to having her named in the book.
Well, she immediately goes to the pages where her name is all over. There are pictures of her, and she goes to that. I gave it to a teacher at her school, and I told the story of Amaya's in this book, a fictional form of Amaya. one of her friends, and the next day one of her friends said, Maya, this is you. Maya, this is you. And she said, well, don't read anymore. I'm embarrassed to be in this. But embarrassed means thrilled. You have to translate that. I'm thrilled to be in it, but she didn't want somebody to make a big deal of her at school. But so my goal is to write a novel for each one of my grandkids, and she's the first.
Oh, how exciting.
Yeah.
Oh, how
and
exciting.
So she was thrilled. I dedicated the book to her.
Mm-hmm.
And when her mom read, my daughter, Kate, when she read the dedication, she started crying because she didn't know that this novel was dedicated to Amaya.
Oh, that is beautiful. That is so beautiful. Talk about your readers' responses.
Well, that has been the best part of this thing. They have opened up to me. All my other books have been about Lefse and Lutefisk. Well, this is a change of pace. So up till now, I just hear Lefse and Lutefisk stories. But now, this is a deeper story that I hear from the readers. This is, they're telling me very personal stuff about someone they lost and the importance of this person who they lost. And that has been, I feel like they're entrusting me with something precious. And the book has opened this up so that we can all talk about how we did it, how we went through this grief. So it's just been a thrill to hear these stories, and I've been honored to hear them.
I have been so excited since I've read this book. I've told a number of my friends about it who have young children. I think either reading the book to the younger child or putting it in the hands of the 12-year-old and over will be just a wonderful thing.
Thank you.
Talk about the differences that you discovered writing fiction versus nonfiction.
Nonfiction, it's at a heady level, and you can hide behind other people's quotes and other people's stories. You can use their quotes and their stories to say what you want, but fiction is more personal. It's going into my heart, and that's what you have to do to write fiction. And when you go there, are people going to get, what will they think of me? Will they get afraid? I feel much more vulnerable talking about Final Rounds than all my other books. That it's so much more personal. I want people to like this book more than my other books. I think that's those two, the vulnerability and wanting people to like this book, because I like it so much more, and there's enough of a pleaser in me that I just have to trust that if I like it, other people will like it. I still read, I've read this, I've written it, I've rewritten it, I've read it, but I still cry when I get to the last 3 chapters. And that feels good. I mean, I like the idea of crying. I think it's very healthy. But I wonder if I'm just off on a limb. Will other people have that same reaction? It turns out they do, and I'm very gratified for that. But it's just much more of a risk.
Yes, putting yourself out there
Exactly
makes for some not so easy feelings sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a website where people can find out more about your books?
Yeah, it's lefseking.com, LEFSEKING.com. All my books are there. This one qualifies for the Lefse King site because it's Final Rounds and it's on love, loss, life, and Lefse. Lefse is important to this, not only at the beginning where Amaya is remembering Papa and their big night, but also at the end. And I won't say anything more about that, but it's like any tradition, anything that's central to a growing up experience. So it's lefseking.com to answer your question.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about what your writing process is? How did you write this? Did you write it, sit down and put it on the paper and it was done, or did you write it in fits and starts? How did that work?
Well, I didn't realize it. My wife said later that this just poured out of you. I wrote it over 4 months, basically, which is fast. I started off, a lot of the issue with writing is getting going.
Yes.
Because your head is full of all sorts of stuff. So I thought, all right, I'm just going to write like a 35-page short little rhyme that has to do with grief. And so I started off with these rhymes about Amaya. My papa passed away today, I don't know what to do. My pooper popper's right, he'd say. Writing finds the you that's true. Those are the first couple of lines of the book. So I thought, I'm just going to keep going with this, and I kept rhyming, and I didn't think of myself as that much of a rhymer, but boy, it was fun.
Yes.
And it was relaying a story, and Amaya, young people, all people like rhymes. There's short little lines, there's rhymes that is a big payoff at the end of the line. They're bright, they're witty. And so I just kept going with this, and then it just, well, maybe I should do this, maybe I should add that. This character led to another character. Mrs. Taylor came in, and now we've got a wonderful blooming thing going on, and now I just have to trim it and shape it. I always knew where I was going. I knew what the ending was, and that really helped, because you can get distracted with this and that, and characters will want you to write more about that, and I said, no, you can't do that. I got to get to the end. But I always knew what the end was, and that was very helpful. But it's my first novel, and so I didn't want to make it huge. I've been told it's a novel you can read in one sitting, and so I'm grateful for that. Otherwise, it would have been too unwieldy. So that was my process, and it was just sitting down and writing, blanking out the distractions, and having confidence that what you have is, if it's moving me, it's moving others. So at least that's my hope.
Yes. Any final word before we end today?
Well, final word about final rounds. It's a book that is a change of pace for me. It's a book that I have such a special place in my heart because it touches the heart. It's my heart to your heart. And it's about a topic, grief and loss, that has happened to all of us. And it's going to happen to the people that follow us, the kids, our kids and grandkids. So it's instructive about how to do this. And Amaya goes at it, as young people do, with energy and creativity that I found inspiring.
Well, thank you, Gary Legwold, for joining us at Mary's Eclectic Interest. And we hope to see you soon at the next episode of Mary's Eclectic Interest.